Hello and welcome to Where You Lead, a podcast where we, a real-life mother and daughter duo, rewatch Gilmore Girls and discuss the misadventures of fictional mother and daughter duo Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I am Tess Adair, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Karanzan Chronicles, and Beth's daughter.
And I'm Beth, Tess's mom and also a writer. Tess and I have been talking about politics, art, and culture pretty much since she could read. We kept this dialogue up even after she moved to Seattle. Then one day, one of us joked we should do a podcast and move these talks into the digital world. The Gilmore Girls seemed like a good place to start. Their story resonates with us. I was a single mother of a teenage daughter, attending a private school we could not afford. But we also found that the plot lines of the show often touch on topics that Tess and I like to discuss, such as images of women, character development, family dynamics, and music and movies. So here we are, recording from our respective studios in separate cities. Tess is in Seattle, and I am in St. Louis, and I am on my third cup of coffee as we begin our discussion.
And I am on my second cup of coffee, which you, Beth, will be unsurprised to hear has long since gone cold, and I'm drinking it anyway.
And it looks like you are drinking out of the Boston mug that we bought in Boston your junior year of college.
Yes, yeah, actually, I was going to use the Luke's Cafe
That's
mug,
what I
or
got.
the Luke's Diner mug, but apparently I used it earlier this week, and now it's dirty.
Well, mine's clean. I used it today. Mine has gone cold too, but that's okay because it was my third cup.
Oh, and we now have a Patreon. If you would like to support us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/whereyoulead. Every week, we will start off with a synopsis of the episode, along with the date it aired, before heading into our discussion.
Today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 13, Concert Interruptus. It originally aired February 15th, 2001. And by the way, we are now more than halfway through the first season.
Yes. So in this episode, there is a giant town-wide rummage sale happening in Stars Hollow that was apparently Lorelai Gilmore's idea. And at the same time, Rory gets assigned to work in a group with Paris, Madeline, and Louise at school and ends up inviting them to a concert, which does not go according to plan. So in the opening scene, we get, the opening scene is in Lorelai's bedroom.
It is literally a cold open in a closet.
Yes.
We open it up and they are pulling stuff out of the closet.
Lorelai is very reluctant to give up any of her clothes, even though apparently this rummage sale was her idea, which Rory is keen to remind her of. And after she refuses a couple of items that seem to make sense to give up, Rory just takes a whole chunk of the middle of her closet and walks off with it.
That was weird. I mean, it was hard for me to watch her do that because I thought, no, you want to look at each one of those pieces individually. That I'm not sure, but you know. But the other thing that happened here is that Lorelai does not want to give up the red halter top with tassels that she has had since she was 17. Now, I understand at some point, I mean, I have probably 3 tubs full of toddler clothes from yours and your brother's early years that I have kept, along with some things of my mother's, and there's sentimentality attached to these items, and I understand that, but I long ago threw away at my few halter tops I had. None of them had tassels, but so yeah, she's got, because that is so frustrating for Rory, she just grabs a whole bunch of clothes and says, we're taking these, and she doesn't even look to see. So I think we have to assume that Lorelai is a clothes hog.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that continues to be kind of a joke throughout the episode, right? She keeps getting drawn to the ugliest stuff in the rummage sale.
Rhinestones in particular.
Yeah.
So my first alternate title for this episode episode is step away from the closet, because she says that to her at one point.
That's a good one. I like that one.
But in this scene, Rory is clearly the adult here. Lorelai is struggling. Well, and that's interesting to me, actually, when you think about it. When you're a teenager, do you hold on to stuff as a teenager? Because I don't know that I did. Maybe a few things. I was much more likely to hold on to things that had sentimental value for me after I had children.
Yeah, God, I'm trying to think. I feel like my memory of my clothes when I was a teenager was like most of them I didn't care about, and the few items that I remember absolutely loving just seemed to disappear at some point. And I don't really know.
It wasn't me.
I didn't assume it was like, I don't know. There's just some specific items. I mean, there are some things that you still have, like my prom dresses. You still have. I don't know. I have a memory of a couple of specific items, and I just don't know what happened to them. I assume I lost them.
I'll see a picture of myself in a shirt that I loved, and think, what did I do with that shirt? I really liked that shirt. It just disappeared. No idea what happened to it. But you do have one shirt still from your tween years, actually, that you sleep in.
Oh yeah. I have a sleeping shirt that I got at horseback riding camp when I was
Ace
9.
Stables.
One of the few camps I went to. Yeah, Ace Stables.
But that is the one thing you kept that you would never let me get rid of. And it's threadbare at this point, right? I mean, you sleep in it.
It is, yeah. It's just a really nice, soft cotton shirt. It's funny because I don't think that I actually wore it out in my regular day life that long. It very quickly became a sleeping shirt, I think because it was just such a lovely soft cotton. And yeah, I've just kept it. And yeah, the top part where the collar is kind of falling apart. I should probably try to sew it up at some point. But yeah, no, I still have it.
Or throw it out.
No. No. I've had that shirt for 20 years.
Oh, more
I've had
than
that
that.
shirt for 25 years.
25 years, yeah.
So yeah, I feel like I can't throw it away at this point. It's a part of my identity.
That's pretty wild. I don't know that I have any clothes at this point that are that old.
I mean, that is definitely by far the oldest thing that I own. I don't own. I don't still have anything else.
Oh, okay. I have to back up and say that I do have a wool skirt that I bought in my 20s in the 80s. That was one of the first professional pieces of clothing I'd ever owned. And I love that skirt so much that I held on to it after I, gained weight and I was too big for it. I bought it back when I was tiny. And I kept telling myself, one of these days I'm going to wear this again. I've never been able to wear it. It's a pretty small size, but it's a lovely skirt and it's a nice soft wool. I mean, it was a designer piece of clothing, and I bet you I could get money for it at this point. But it's sitting, it's sitting downstairs with your prom dresses.
Okay. Anyway, getting back to the episode.
Yeah, we're off topic.
So yeah, we've got the opening scene up in Lorelai's room, and then Rory recklessly takes a bunch of Lorelai's clothes. I do a little bit identify with Lorelai. I mean, I think everything that she picks out of the rummage sale is absolutely hideous. But if you forced me to give up a certain percentage of my closet, I don't know that I could. There are a couple of individual pieces that I could probably force myself to part with, but I do have a pretty hefty closet, and I do not want to give any of it up. So I do identify with Lorelai a little bit here. And then the credits roll, and then we continue with preparation for the rummage sale, this time with Rory and Lane. Lane holds up a giant poster of kittens in a toilet for some reason, and they say that this is the second one that they've got, but this one is signed. So, okay.
I have no idea. It makes no sense to me.
This kind of begins what continues to happen throughout the whole episode, which is basically everyone from the town is showing up to dump all their crap in Lorelai's house.
Suki comes, or maybe she comes later, but Taylor comes.
She comes later. Yeah, Taylor comes in this
love
scene.
that he loves the idea of an instruction manual. And Lorelai gets him. When he's talking about this piece, he's donating a piece of, I don't know,
he's donating a whole set,
dishes,
dishware set,
and there's a chip in one, and he says, but I ground it down, and he's giving information about it, and Lorelai says, do you want to write an instruction manual about that? And he said, oh, could I please? He does that.
I thought that was really cute.
It was adorable. I mean, it was really very, very sweet. And of course, Luke shows up. when Lorelai's not in the room, and he's told to
Yes.
put his stuff in the kitchen because it's also related. Pots and pans. He brought pots and pans.
Yeah.
So he takes that into the kitchen, and then she doesn't know he's in there. She walks in there, and she yells out, "There's a man in my kitchen! Someone call the constable!" So that's my second alternate possible title for the episode. Anyway, so this the whole show basically is about the rummage. The whole episode is about the rummage sale. Can't talk today, and the concert. It's like those two things.
Yes, and then at the end of this scene, Suki shows up, and my note about this is she appears to be showing up from a brand new door in their house.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
She enters in through this side door that I don't think we've ever seen before.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to go back and look. Cause I did write down that today is Tuesday because somebody says it's Tuesday and the sale is Sunday. So I'm tracking the days here, people. Cause but she shows up with tickets to the Bangles concert that she gets from somebody she's done a good thing for.
Yeah, a ticket broker who she made a volcano cake for. It was possibly a wedding at the inn or something, and she made a volcano cake, and he really liked it, so he got her Bangles tickets, which I feel like the thing that struck me about that was like, oh my gosh, this was a period of time when there were still small-time ticket brokers, and everything wasn't controlled by Ticketmaster.
Well, that's and they're going to New York City to see it, but when you get there, it's a pretty small theater, too.
Yeah.
Although at this point, and I had to think about it, because the Bangles, I guess, were big in the 80s, and this is 2001, so at this point, they've been around. In fact, they say at some point that Rory likes them, but Lorelai liked them as a teenager. We'll get to that later on. And I had to stop and think, oh yeah, they're, to me it's all a blur the last 40 years. But the Bangles were big in the 80s. They were big 40 years ago. They were one of the first. There were several all-women bands during the 80s, and they were called girl bands. I hate that, but anyway, all-women bands. Mm-hmm. They were one of the more successful ones. Talk Like an Egyptian is their big song. And actually, that's one of the lines that I think...
Yeah, Lorelai says.
When Lorelai says later on, we'll get to that, yeah. But it's what's amazing to me about that is that I remembered that, and did I write it here or did I write it later? When they get to the concert, the main singer for the Bangles is, I wrote her name down somewhere. I guess we haven't got to it yet. But anyway, I saw her on something a couple of months ago, and I didn't know who she, Susanna Huffs, and I didn't know who she was, and I thought, oh, this woman is a really good singer. I had no idea. I wasn't into the Bangles, wasn't into the girl groups. That was not my thing. Yeah, I didn't really like that music. I'm kind of an oddity that way. But anyway, I heard her on, might have been an NPR Tiny Concert. It was something like that. And she sang a song, and I thought, she's got a great voice. And it was a really good song. She was playing guitar, and I thought, who is this woman? So I had to look her up, and she was the lead singer for the Bangles. So that's my throw out here. Right. But anyway, so there was a moment, though, when they're talking about this, and it looks to me like Rory wants to invite Dean instead of Lane because there are 4 tickets. Really? It seems obvious to me when Suki walks in and the 4 of them are standing there, and she's talking about the 4 of them going to the concert together, the 4 of them being Suki, Lorelai, Rory, and Lane. Mm-hmm. Why is that not obvious to Rory? And is she really thinking when she says, well, who's the 4th ticket for? Is she thinking like offering it to Dean?
That is not what occurred to me.
Really? That's what occurred to me. So, which I thought was a little disheartening because Suki very clearly says 4 girls to go see 4 girls or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's obvious to me who she's talking about. Why isn't it obvious to Rory? It was kind of weird, but
yeah, I don't know.
But they have it's great tickets too. They're like 9th row, which is
9th row.
Really, really good tickets. Yeah.
Okay, so the next scene is Rory in class where Tristan is there again and hard staring at her throughout class, and the teacher repeatedly notices. I hate Tristan.
And the thing is, he wants her because he can't have her. It's all about controlling her, and it's realistic, I guess. So I'm glad that it's part of the show. But I'm like you. I really hate the character.
Yeah, I hate him. Um, but yeah, then they all get broken up into teams, and of course, Rory is put on a team with Paris, Louise, and Madeline, and that kind of starts our final thread here, which is that this whole episode is an important moment in Rory's relationship with these three girls. So they get paired together. Paris is obviously not happy about it,
which is dumb, really, because she knows that these other two girls aren't going to pull their weight, and she's got to know at this point that Rory is going to pull her weight, and that I don't understand why she's upset. But
well, I think from what we get for the rest of the episode, whenever we talk about how they're going to divide this up, I think it's because Paris just assumes that she's actually going to do the majority of the work, and she just wants people who will just obey her, and that's what Louise and Madeline will do.
And you've probably worked on team efforts like this before, and my problem with these kinds of efforts, and I realize that this is why they do it, is that there are always members of the team that don't carry their weight. And it's usually 4 or 5 people. I always hated them, but I also always understood that part of the assignment is learning to work with others on a team, and that's very important for life, but always frustrating when you have 1 or 2 people doing most of the work and the other 2 getting as much credit. So a good team leader is going to make sure that everybody pulls their weight. But of course, Paris is not a team leader. She is always looking out for herself. If it were up to Rory, she would assign everybody equal amounts of work and make sure that they did it.
I mean, I do think it's kind of a lot to ask of a teenager to be a leader of a team. Like, I do understand that we want kids to learn how to work on teams, but it's one thing to learn how to work with a team. It's another thing to know how to lead a team. That is kind of a lot to ask of a teenager, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking of college and graduate school. I don't remember teams in high school, so you may be right. Yeah.
I mean, I do remember doing a couple of group projects in high school, but the thing is, I went to a really small high school and we were all friends with each other. So our team group projects actually usually went pretty well because you knew everybody. And for the most part, I think we were usually allowed to pick our own teams since it was like so small and we were all friendly. There was very little chance of people getting left out. Yeah, I don't know. I have pretty good memories of the groups I was in high school, less so the groups I was in college because those were much bigger classes, and I don't actually think I did that many group projects in college, but the one that I remember was one where I was paired with a kind of frat boy, and I just had to do everything because he wasn't going to do anything. So anyway, they get paired up together, and out in the hallway, they discuss where they're going to do it, and they end up agreeing to go to Rory's house because everyone else has a reason why it can't be their house. Oh, and then Tristan, of course, shows up again to deliberately flirt with Paris in front of Rory, which Rory doesn't seem to really care that much about, but Paris obviously does care quite a bit about because Paris still likes Tristan, unfortunately. Then we get back to the town. Lane and Rory try to convince Lane's mom to let her go, and they kind of fumble immediately.
Yeah, the thing about this scene that doesn't work for me is that Lane is usually, although it works for the plot of the story, Lane is usually much better at manipulating her mother than she was in this scene. She screws it up. She calls it a show instead of, because they had agreed walking into the house, they were going to say they were going to a play Saturday night. Now, as I'm listening to this, I'm realizing I really don't like how often Lane has to lie to her mother. That really bothers me as a parent. And actually, I think this episode, there's an underlying theme to it that's about parenting and the responsibility of being a good parent. And we'll talk about that later after the concert stuff. But Mrs. Kim is a good parent. The fact that Lane, and I understand that Lane really loves music, and it's not fair that her mother doesn't allow her to do things that she thinks she would be harmed by, or that are in violation of their faith or of their Korean traditions. And I understand all of that, and it's a problem, but at the same time, it bothers me that she feels that it's so easy for her to lie to her mother. I don't like that dynamic at all. I don't know how realistic it is. It may be realistic. It's just very difficult for me to watch. But in this situation, I have to wonder if it wasn't difficult for Lane as well, and that's why she messes it up. They have to have a good justification for this, even though it moves the plot along.
Yeah.
There has to be something in the character development that works for her to mess this up. And there is a look on her face at one point. So I'm thinking that the character at this point, and she lies to her mother all the time, and I wonder how comfortable she is with it. So anyway, so she messes it up, and Mrs. Kim has a clue that there's something going on, that she's lying about it. So she says, we'll talk about it later. But one of the things that happens in the conversation is Lane asks her if she can go somewhere tomorrow, and Mrs. Kim says tomorrow is church. The concert is on Saturday. So is church on Saturday? All I can think is it's a 5 p.m. Catholic Mass. So she wants to go after church. That's the only way this works for me.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, I'm pretty sure the concert is Saturday, and apparently they go to church on Saturday.
Catholic Masses, or sometimes they do that for families so they can do things on Sundays. And I guess so many people attend Mass that they have to break it up like that. I don't know. You remember Elizabeth and her family would often go to Mass at 5 p.m. on Saturday. That's how I learned about this. Your friend Elizabeth, when you were growing up, her family went.
I was 5 then, so no, I don't remember.
You don't remember that, do you? Well, I remember.
I mean, I remember that they were Catholic and that they went to church, but I don't remember what days they went to church.
I think her mother, and I can't remember Elizabeth's mother's name. Can you?
Anne.
I always thought that 5 o'clock on Saturday was a good time to go. They go out to dinner afterwards. They get it out of the way. So if they had stuff to do during the day on Sunday, because both of her kids are very active in sports, they could do that. So that's what they did. And so that's what I'm thinking. That's what's going on here. There's a 5 p.m. Catholic Mass.
I have actually always identified Elaine a little bit with Elizabeth, because Elizabeth also had a very religious family that was in fact half Korean.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I'd forgotten that. And she did lie to her mother a lot. Sorry, Anne.
Well, I don't know if we should out her on the podcast. But anyway, okay, so so after that unfortunate conversation, Rory goes into Luke's and is surprised to see that he actually put up a sign for the rummage sale on the diner, because he normally is very resistant to putting up anything in the diner that isn't his.
And this references back to the pumpkins and
the pumpkin stuff.
He didn't want to put pumpkins in the windows. He doesn't want to do that, but he will do anything for Lorelai. And she asked him, so he did, which causes a problem in my mind, because it brings in so much stuff. Well, first, before we get to that, the scene is funny, because he tells her the coffee won't be ready for a few minutes, and she keeps teasing him about the sign in the window, and he finally says, "Do you want that coffee or not? I'll make a decaf if you don't stop." But then anyway, so it does cause a problem for Lorelai, because their house is overrun with all these bags of things that people have donated. And I have in my notes here, why didn't she just have everyone drop off their stuff at wherever the sale was going to be held?
Yeah.
Because that way they don't have to, because they only have to sort it. They got to move it. But then we find out later in the episode that it's an outdoor sale. And so they couldn't do it at where, I don't know if it's in the town square. It's not obvious. It might be in the town square, but it's an outdoor sale, and that's why they can't do it. So that's why they're dropping everything off at her house. But wow, I mean, it's claustrophobic. There's so much stuff in that.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Which actually, so before we continue with that, because I do have a note here about my alternate title for the episode. But right before that, Lorelai shows up at the diner wearing the ugliest sweatshirt I've ever seen, and Luke flips out at her. I mean, it's rhinestones. Also, the pattern is sort of like a modeled, not quite camo. I hate it. And she's wearing a camo cowboy hat. Yeah,
pretty awful. The whole outfit is bad.
And Luke is horrified. He flips out and tells her that she shouldn't wear other people's stuff. It's very clear that this sweatshirt means something to him, but we don't yet quite know what. But he flips out and leaves and refuses to pour them any coffee.
And why doesn't Lorelai figure this out? It was obvious to me that it's a woman's shirt. He's upset about it. This has to be either something that belonged to his mother or his sister or girlfriend. If it's his mother or sister, then one that they had to have died. Or it could be an old girlfriend. And it's so obvious right away. Why doesn't she get it? She can be real, I don't know.
Obtuse.
She can be obtuse. That's exactly the right word. Almost deliberately so. It's like she doesn't want to understand what's going on here.
Yeah. So then we cut back to the house, and there is a sign out front that says, "Rummage sale, drop off here, Nothing Alive or Gross. So that's my alternate title. Nothing Alive
or Gross. Yeah. And then we see the claustrophobia that is the indoor stuff.
It's getting really bad.
It's really bad. But then I think the next thing is, it's still at the house, but it's Miss Patty. Do you want to describe that?
Yeah, Miss Patty shows up with the biggest set of drums in the world and explains that she danced, I danced on these drums at the Copacabana in 1969.
Wow. I mean, that just conjures all kinds of images for me. These are huge drums, first of all, and they're very colorful. They look like a Copacabana kind of, drum set, but it's not a drum set. They're stacked on top of each other. So I'm thinking, how do you dance on drums, first of all?
I mean, I wonder if they're not really drums. Like, if it's like a stage that just looks like drums or something. Because, an actual drum, any human being would like crash through. Drums are not built to be stood upon.
And they show us a little bit about Miss Patty. She really does have an interesting backstory.
Yeah.
And it's always very sexual in nature.
Yeah.
Because the implication is it was erotic dancing. So, I mean, that was the implication I got from it.
She did a dance with bananas or something.
Yeah. I don't know what that is.
So, and Miss Patty remains in the scene. Lane shows up and then tells everybody that she can't go to the concert because her mom figured it out and won't let her go. Specifically, her mom doesn't want her to go to a rock concert. I think this is an ongoing thing, is that Mrs. Kim is really opposed to the music that Lane really likes.
Mm-hmm.
So Miss Patty sticks around, so she's there when Lorelai brings up the hideous sweatshirt again. And I think it's Miss Patty immediately recognizes it, and so does Suki, and they tell her that it belonged to Rachel, Luke's ex-girlfriend, who apparently... So this is where we get a little bit more of the... I mean, I think they're clarifying Luke's backstory, but it is a contradiction. They're not just
clarifying it, they're changing it. And
they're changing it, yeah.
They're contradicting things. It's like they didn't have a clear idea. Maybe Luke wasn't supposed to be a major character when they started. I don't know. But they have changed his story several times now.
I think part of what's happening here is that they want to do these kind of rom-com type things with Lorelai and Luke, but in order to do that, they sort of have to, like, not know about each other's background. Like, they keep wanting to do these storylines where one or the other of them finds out more about the other's past, which is weird because they've lived in the same town for at least a decade.
And that's what they say to them. Suki says to her, you had an 11-year-old kid and you were just moving into this house. Okay, yes. So Luke has been here at least 5 years, but then somebody also says he's lived here his entire life.
His entire life. He didn't even go away to college.
Okay, but earlier in the show, we were given the impression that he had left and come back. So this is contradictory, and I'm sitting here thinking, what the hell, writers? You cannot... Okay, Friends. Let's just talk for a second about Friends, about how their story arc developed. It was always consistent, and there were 6 of them. 6 of them? Yeah, there were 6 of them and 6 of their stories to keep straight. Those writers sat down before the show started and mapped out an arc of their timelines and their stories so they wouldn't make these kinds of mistakes. We're just we're only halfway into the first season and they are already making huge mistakes with people's storylines. And that really is bothersome. I mean, I like this show, but this is inexcusable. His story has to be one or the other. It can't be, unless they figure out a way in season 3 to explain how he could both have lived here his whole life, but also gone away and come back. I don't know. Maybe they will.
Because so what's happening in this scene, since I'm not sure if we've actually said it, is that Luke dated this woman, Rachel, for a while. He was a serious girlfriend. Suki thought they were going to get married, and Lorelai had no idea that this woman existed.
And she's lived here at least 16 years. Yeah.
So, because she moved here around the time that she got pregnant. Like, Rory has lived in this town her whole life. So it just feels like they're painting this weird picture of this small, close-knit town where somehow Luke and Lorelai are both very close and see each other every day, but somehow have completely missed huge chunks of each other's lives.
It makes me wonder, too, if Luke is supposed to be quite a bit older than Lorelai. I'm not sure.
I mean, he doesn't look that much older than her.
No, he doesn't. But if she was 27 when this happened to him, I don't know. It's just, it's a difficult scene in terms of
Yeah.
consistency in the show for me. But
Yeah, for
anyway,
sure.
here's the other thing about Rachel's backstory. I think it's Miss Patty, or I'm not sure which one. I think it's Miss Patty says she had a history of she doing. Oh no, maybe it was Suki. She did a lot of adventurous stuff. She dove into tiny lakes. Okay, so the big thing right now on TikTok is people belly flopping into water. Have you
Oh
seen this?
god.
So they can get
Yeah,
their
I saw it
videos
because
to
you
go.
sent me that clip about
Yeah,
it.
to get their videos to go viral.
I hate it.
It's literally a death-defying thing when you're that high up. I mean, it's one thing to dive in or to jump in feet first, but to do a belly flop 40 feet down or 60 feet down,
Yeah.
it's
Although
insane.
Chelsea
And
Handler is right, most of those videos were not true belly flops.
that's true. They're trekking in or whatever because they
Yeah.
know it's that's how you kill yourself. I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought that was my immediate thought when they said that she liked to dive into tiny lakes.
Gosh, yeah. So Suki and Miss Patty have this funny back and forth where Suki says that she thinks Rachel was a photographer, and then Miss Patty says, no, she was an archaeologist. Or wait, a flight attendant. These are very different careers. I mean, yes,
but
they
all
both require a certain amount of travel.
Travel, yes, they all require
Yeah.
adventurous travel. Yeah.
Which, okay, I like, and I don't actually remember, but I think Rachel does later show up as a character, and I want to say photographer is the correct one.
Okay, so they got something right.
So they have that funny back and forth, and yeah, I think a little bit later Suki talks about how adventurous she was with the diving into lakes or whatever, which I feel like to me the weirdest part about that is, I don't know, that doesn't really sound like a kind of woman that Luke would really go for, but maybe she was the one who pursued him. I don't know.
And why was she living in this town? We don't get any of that.
Yeah,
We might
good
get
question.
it later. And it's really probably not that important. The important piece is that she was important to Luke. And he was
Yes.
devastated when she broke it off and left. And that's why he
Yes.
did not want to see Lorelai, who he also has feelings for, and we know that already,
Yeah.
wearing Rachel's
that.
shirt that he had donated to the rummage sale. Yeah.
Then Paris, Louise, and Madeline show up. They drive up in a convertible. I don't know. Did you recognize what kind of car
Oh, it's a
that was?
BMW. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was a
And
BMW convertible, and I think she says something like, "What's the line that Lorelai says about
oh, she must be the best babysitter ever to be
Yeah.
able to afford that.
that kind of a car?" Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and then Paris makes some kind of comment about like having trouble finding the house because there's no street name, and Rory tells her that that's why she told her to turn right at the big rooster statue. So apparently there's a big rooster statue in town.
But I'm with Paris on this. You got to have fucking street signs on your streets. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's just,
Yeah.
how do you not have street signs?
I mean, how do they get their mail?
How do they get their mail? And are they living on dirt roads? I mean,
yeah.
is it that rural? I don't think it is. I mean, they should have street signs.
I will say, though, it is Connecticut, and I did live there, and I did have to drive through some small towns, and actually there are more dirt roads than you would expect.
I kind of remember that too. Yeah.
For such a tiny state, there is a lot of rural space there.
But they do find the house, and
They do find the house.
They even find a way to sit in that living room, which
Yes.
is kind of wild. But I love this scene because
It's cute.
there's some bonding going on. The beginnings of bonding
Yeah.
between Rory and Paris, and at some point in
And
the
Madeline and
scene,
Louise.
Yeah, but they feel like characters to me they're disruptors.
I mean, yeah, they're not as important as Paris, but I do think in this scene in particular, they are the ones who are warming up to Rory first.
And to Rory's mom, they really like
Yeah.
her mom because she's ordered pizza.
They're like in love with her.
They're in love with her. She's ordered pizza.
Yeah.
She's funny. She's young. She likes the mangles.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
They're also really into the clothes. They pick up some of Miss Patty's old clothes, and one of them asks whether it's a Poochie, which I had to look up because my first thought was, is this supposed to be like a coded reference to Gucci? But it's not. Poochie is a real design, and actually it looks very similar to that shirt. It's a lot of like
Okay.
abstract bright color patterns. Yeah.
I
And-
recognized
and
the
it is
word, but I
expensive.
didn't. But I couldn't have told you what kind of clothing it was. So yeah, that's
Yeah, it's a designer, and yeah, they did a lot of bright colored abstract patterns that look very similar to that shirt.
Well, here's my question, and this speaks to the inconsistencies that we have repeatedly seen in this show is that they all talk about being 16. Now Rory does not say that, but the other three do say that they're all exactly 16. Because it comes up that one of them asks Rory how old her mom is. She says she's 32,
she's 32.
And she does the math and realizes that she had her at 16. So they're talking about how difficult that must have been. But in the same scene, there's another, I don't know if it's Suki and Lorelai in another room, but she says, or maybe, I don't know who she's talking to, but she says, you have 3 more years at Chilton. Which means she's a sophomore. So, and you have to. So it must be Lorelai that says this because she's saying you have to make friends, basically.
Yeah.
Because that's when she decides to give the tickets to the girls. I think that's when that happens.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm getting ahead of the story. But they're all 16, and yet no, Rory was driving a car on her own in the 2nd or 3rd episode, The Deer Hunters, and her birthday party was after that.
Yep.
She is 17.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I think basically she has been 16 twice. I think she was 16 and then she turned 16. I think that's essentially
There's some real serious issues in this show. And like I said, friends, it can be done. You don't have to do this haphazardly. And this seems haphazard to me. I've written a novel, and the craziest thing, the hardest thing for me about the stupid novel was getting everybody's timelines right and how their ages and their relationships.
Consistent.
That's the hardest part. If it's a linear novel, so this is important. You should get this right, and they don't get it right over and over again.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of timeline inconsistencies on the show, and I do think that was kind of common in a lot of shows at the time. Again, I keep comparing this to, not every show. I said a lot of shows, not every show. I keep comparing this to Dawson's Creek, which I think was similarly kind of fast and loose with its timeline. And a lot of teen shows in particular, because the problem with a teen show is that in theory, and actually, you know what? I will say Friends did this a little bit because Friends regularly has the friends hanging out in the coffee shop in the middle of the day all the time as if none of them have jobs. And there's actually a joke about it at one point in the show where they all say something about how like all of their bosses don't like them. And then Joey points out, well, maybe it's because you're in a coffee shop in the middle of the workday. But it is a regular thing. And I think in shows about teenagers in particular, they kind of have to walk this tightrope, and most of them just don't, where like in theory these kids should be in school for 8 hours a day, but it's really hard to do storylines if your people are in school 8 hours a day, because the reality of being a teenager is most of your life is school. That is just what you're going to spend most of your time doing, school or schoolwork, and that is just never true in any of these shows because it doesn't make for good drama. So a lot of the time these shows will sort of give you the impression that these kids almost never have to go to class, that school is just sort of a backdrop where drama happens, and a lot of them will do these weird things where like, okay, well, I guess it was Monday in the first scene, but now everybody's going away for the weekend, so I guess it's the weekend now. It's the weekend forever. It's always the weekend because things can only happen on the weekend.
Or after school. Yeah.
Or after
absolutely.
school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree. I think watching this show this close, it's very clear that they have some continuity issues in this first season. The next thing that happens, so Lorelai does kind of express some surprise that she's never heard of Rachel before, and she says, I go to Luke's once a day, sometimes twice, 3 times if Michelle has talked to one of his relatives and his accent has gotten thicker.
What does that mean?
So I actually do kind of get this a little bit. I think it means that like after he has been speaking French, his French accent just like it gets thicker.
Oh, I thought maybe he was getting angry and
I assumed it was a language thing.
Okay.
Because, like sometimes people will like go to vacation in England and then come back with like a half-formed British accent.
Yeah, it's hard. That's the funniest line in the show though.
But yeah, so then we do get Lorelai suggesting that Rory bring her new school friends along.
They find out that Lane can't go. She gets a call from her, and she finds out she can't go.
They find out that Lane can't
and
go.
The thing is, as soon as Lorelai is suggesting this, I'm like, shouldn't you talk to Suki? I mean, they were her tickets.
Right? Yeah. I have a note later on, like, Suki is the most chill friend ever because these were her tickets, and she's, like, not at all pissed that Lorelai just gave them away.
Well, and I guess Suki is sort of a co-parent with, and she, you can see how she would go in on this because she would see that this is a good thing for Rory to be able to bond with these girls. But yeah, it's crazy. It's like, okay, ninth row seats to a concert that you all have been talking about for months. And you're gonna give Suki's seat away to somebody else. That's
to
a
three
lot.
girls who like don't even know what band this is.
I mean, she could have given the one Elaine's ticket to Paris, but maybe Paris wouldn't have gone without her two support friends.
I mean, I do think that's likely because she was the most resistant to going in the first place.
Yeah, she was.
Also, it is really awkward to try to invite one person in front of two other people that you're not inviting.
It is.
I think they could either invite all of them or none of them.
She loves the Bangles too, Lorelai. So for her to give up these
I think they're her favorite band.
Yeah, so for her to do this, she really loves her daughter because they do end up, she and Suki end up in nosebleed seats. They decide to give the 4 tickets to the 4 girls, and then they get the nosebleed seats, which are literally the second from the top. And I have sat in those kind of nosebleed seats. Usually it's I think the couple of times that I did is when I grabbed tickets at the last minute for a show that I didn't know was happening, or because somebody decided, well, I went to see Dylan one time when I was exactly second row from the top.
I think the last 2 shows that I went to, I was sitting in like the second to last or last row at the very top, and it's just because shows today are wildly expensive. Like these tickets were like over $100 each. I don't remember exactly, but like I went to see Hadestown when it came to town, and we were in literally the last highest row, and those seats were, I think, over $100 each. So it was like, like, I enjoyed the show, and I'm glad I went, but like, I wasn't really going to spend like $400 per. No. Also, to be fair, I do think we got our tickets a little bit later than we probably should have because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to go. But yeah, it was also just like, trying to sit any closer than that, you're going to spend so much money on a show that, I'd listened to the soundtrack, but I didn't know for sure how much I was going to enjoy it. So it was like, I want to go. I don't know if I want to spend $400 a seat.
Yeah. Well, and when we went to see Trevor Noah a year and a half ago in Seattle, we were up in nosebleed seats too because, again, it was a stadium show. And I wasn't going to spend more than, I think we ended up spending $60 or $70 a piece on the tickets. But even so, it was a pretty good show. I mean, it was our seats we were way high up, but we were close to the stage, so it wasn't terrible. Yeah. But the Dylan seats that I had, it was in an opera house, and we were literally the second row from the top, which is where they're sitting. Could not see him. And I hadn't expected this because the previous time I'd seen Dylan, it was in a much smaller venue. And so I thought, well, not everybody goes to see Dylan these days. So we waited till the last minute. We waited too long to buy seats. And that's all that was available, which made me happy because I'm glad Dylan is selling out, that size theater. And so that's always a good thing. And the seats weren't that expensive. It was just that we waited too long. So in this case, the Bangles, whom she loves, there are only a few seats left, and they're second row from the top. And then she sits there and gets the giggles about it.
Yeah, she starts laughing about it. I did want to say real fast, like popping back a little bit, I just wanted to point this out. Lorelai makes this weird appetizer dish for the girls that's just like,
oh my God,
Pop-Tarts displayed on a plate with one apple in the center.
Well, she knows that they're not going to eat the apple, so it's basically the Pop-Tarts. Yeah. But she's also ordered pizza.
But also, did she even toast the Pop-Tarts? It kind of looked like she didn't. It looked like she just took them out of the package and immediately put them on the plate.
But I think a lot of people eat Pop-Tarts cold. I know I have. So it's doable. But she stands there and she's like playing with them to get just the right presentation. Really, it's nice. Pop-Tarts.
But that's very Lorelai.
That is very Lorelai. Then she gets it done, and she sticks the apple right on top. So, we got to make this healthy.
But yeah, then we're at the concert, and Suki and Lorelai are up in the nosebleeds, and Lorelai just gets the giggles about how bad their seats are, which I will say, actually, I think I've had a reaction like that before.
Oh, yeah.
I think actually at Hadestown, me and my friends were kind of giggling about the fact that we were in the very last row.
Well, and I tell you what, there was one time that I did not have the giggles, and we had bad seats. We went to see Fleetwood Mac, and the only time I've ever seen them, I was very careful about our seat selection. We were willing to spend money on these seats. So, and I'd never seen them before, and Kristen McPhee was with them. I'm so glad I got to see it because she just recently died. But they were bad seats, and they weren't terrible seats, but they weren't great. And I was astounded because I had looked at the seating chart. I found what I thought were really good seats. I was furious, and we spent a lot of money on these seats, so they were very expensive. So when it was announced a couple months ago, the Bruce Springsteen seats were going to be $400 a piece. I'm like, God. I love him, but I'm not going to spend that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, that is absurd. Ridiculous. So no, not going to do it. The only person I might spend that kind of money on would be Paul McCartney, but and I've seen him twice, and again, both times are kind of nosebleed seats, but it's Paul McCartney. Everybody wants to see him. So Bruce Springsteen, he's very popular, but not worth $400. Not when you've seen him 10 times like I have, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah, but I'm glad I saw Fleetwood Mac, but even then I was like, not laughing, not giggling. Yeah. These ladies are giggling, and the two men sitting next to them in the seats, they don't find it funny that they're sitting in those
they do
seats.
Not. They are not amused the way that Lorelai and Suki are amused. Meanwhile, we then jump back to the girls in the good seats, and apparently Madeline has never been to a concert at all before. She makes some sort of comment.
I didn't pick that up. That's interesting.
Yeah, she says that this is the closest she's ever been to a stage, and she says she would be able to say that kind of no matter where they were sitting because she's never been to a concert at all before. Which also they said earlier when they were hanging out at the house that they were all kind of amazed that Rory goes to concerts with her mom.
Yeah, which is amazing.
I guess, yeah. I mean, we've been to a bunch of concerts together.
Yeah, we saw Amy Mann. We saw Amy Mann, yeah. And the reason we saw it together is that I bought you the two tickets as a Christmas present. But it was on a school night, and you couldn't get a friend to go with you. And at the time, I remember thinking, am I a bad mom for buying tickets for a concert on a school night? And then I thought, no, I don't think so, because Amy Mann didn't tour that much, and it was, and it was a great show. It was at the Pageant.
It was a great show.
So it was a small venue, and we were really close. We had really good seats, and she was so wonderful. It was at the Pageant.
Yeah, she's so funny.
And I think that's the only one we've ever gone together, though. Your dad is taking you to quite a few concerts.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think I had exactly one friend who also listened to Amy Mann, and she and I were not that close. And she had really strict parents, so she was not going to be able to go to a show during the week. Yeah,
it never even occurred to me that you would have friends that wouldn't like the music you liked, but that now it does make more sense.
Yeah, I had very weird taste. Yeah. I had very different taste from most people.
You went to see music. Steve Forbert with your dad. Now,
yes, yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, I think Amy Mann was actually one of the more, like, mainstream youthful things that I listened to, and even so, almost none of my other friends listened to her.
I thought that, too. I didn't think I was going to like her, because I thought it was going to be like an Alanis Morissette thing, because you liking her and discovering her on your own somehow told me that, she's like an Alanis Morissette kind of character, but she's not. She's a rocker, and I love her. And you introduced me to her, and it was a great show, and I'm so glad that we went. But yeah, she's older too. She's not Alanis Morissette.
She's a bit,
maybe 5 or 10 years older than you. I think she's got little kids now, but I think Amy Mann is closer to my age. So it wasn't unusual. She's an unusual performer for you to have liked at the age of whatever it was, 13, 14.
Well, I found her, I discovered her basically because she's a musical guest in an episode of season 7 of Buffy. And she's the only... Yeah, she was the only musical guest who got a line. She gets to say a line. She says, "I hate playing vampire towns." So she's like...
That's right. And then you had to tell me who she was. And the interesting thing, let's hit on that for a second, is there were a lot of musical acts in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and they were all real bands for the most part, right?
Yes.
So, and Amy Mann was one of them. Yeah.
But so we went to see that Amy Mann concert. It was a great concert. You and I have also gone to see Paul Simon together and Bruce Springsteen.
Well, that's true. That was later. You're right. We saw
Bruce
it was a bit
and
Paul.
Older then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Simon went with us to both of those. Your brother went with us, so it was a family thing. Yeah.
But so back to the show. So we're back at the concert, and Madeline and Louise are basically immediately distracted by two boys who are standing in the row behind them. One of whom is played by Brandon Routh, who was briefly a Superman. He was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was Superman in Superman Returns, and I recognized him immediately. He has a very recognizable face. But they immediately start kind of flirting with these boys, and Paris makes a very specific joke. She is totally not surprised by this behavior, and the joke that she makes is, and before it's dark, they'll have every picnic basket that's in Jellystone Park, which I had to look up. It's a Yogi Bear reference.
Yeah.
I don't entirely get what that line in this context means.
It was bizarre. It was a bizarre reference. I did get it, but I didn't understand it.
I guess she's saying that this is just a thing that they do, because she's referencing, like, Yogi Bear always steals picnic baskets in Jellystone Park, right? Like, it's a thing that he does over and over again.
He collects them, I think. Yeah, it would be the word. He steals them, but it's a collecting thing. And so I think she's saying they're collecting boys. So that wherever they go, they're collecting boys. And Paris, other than Tristan, is really not that interested in boys. She really is interested in her future, in her education. Yeah. But in this instance, she is loving this show. I guess I don't know if she was a fan before, but she's dancing and she likes the music, and I think it occurs to her, wow, there's life outside of school. There, I can enjoy myself. It's a Saturday night. We got our work done today. We got our homework done. And that actually is one of the reasons she objects to going, is that she's got homework to do when they're sitting in the living room talking. And somebody says, oh, you'll get it done. You always do. And she knows she will. She's just an introvert. She's not she's not good with people. She's not a social butterfly like the two friends are. And she's not as easy with people as Rory is. Rory's an introvert too, but she finds people much easier than Paris finds them.
Yeah. The impression that I got was that Paris wasn't really familiar with the band, but she was just having such a good time that she became a fan of them during that concert. And I think part of what's happening is that she has never, she's not into boys, but also she has never really made an attempt to hang out with anyone who wasn't Madeline and Louise. I think Madeline and Louise work for her because when they're at school, they will just kind of do what Paris says, and that's why she wants to team with them, because they'll just kind of, they want Paris to do most of the work, and Paris wants to do most of the work. But that does mean that ultimately they don't have very much in common. So I think part of what's happening here is Paris has finally been forced to truly hang out with Rory in a social setting, and she's enjoying herself, and she had no idea that she would. So I literally have in my notes, Paris is having the fucking time of her life.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Louise and Madeline are her army. She uses them, and they use her. So it's that kind of a symbiotic kind of relationship, but she doesn't really
they're
like
her cronies. They're not her friends.
They're her cronies. She doesn't really like them. They're her army. She uses them, but I think she's begrudgingly realizing that she likes Rory. She has similar interests with Rory. Rory is, and later on becomes, I don't know what happens to Lane in this relationship, but they're kind of soulmate friends later on. I mean, they really have a lot in common. They fight too, but this relationship is budding at this point, but it definitely becomes a very important relationship to both of their lives. And this is the beginning of that. They're starting to bond. So it's great.
I kind of feel like it never occurred to Paris that she might be able to hang out in a social situation with people who are more similar to her. She's only ever had Louise and Madeline to hang out with, and they're just not interested in the things that she's interested in. They're just very different people. So for the first time, she's hanging out with Rory, who, like her, does not want to disobey the rules, does not want to run off and go to a crazy party with older boys. You know, basically Rory represents this kind of middle path between the craziness that Madeline and Louise are interested in and the absolute introversion, no fun at all that Paris does.
Yeah, yeah.
And Rory is sort of, Rory does for the most part obey her mom, except like accidentally, but for the most part she obeys the rules. She is sensible about what is safe, and she's not guided entirely by wanting to meet every boy on the planet.
What you just said is very important. Rory is mature for her age, and so is Paris. And these two girls are not. They are actually immature for their age. So who runs off in New York City at 16 with older boys that they have never met before to a party?
Yeah.
And it's crazy. They are absolutely making themselves so vulnerable to date rape, to all kinds of things. Getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of things that could happen to them. And Rory knows this instantly. Now, Paris doesn't say much during this scene. She just kind of lets them do what they want because she figures they're going to do it anyway. But Rory's trying to protect them. She tries to get them to stop. No, you shouldn't do this. First of all, you're breaking my mom's rules. We brought you to this concert. But also, it's not safe. You girls, you don't know who these people are. You're just going to run. Oh, no, we'll be back before the show is over. And, of course, they're not. Which leads us to the next scene. Which is my favorite scene, I think, so far in this season. It's my favorite scene. You want to describe it, and then I'll comment.
Well, before we do, I just wanted to say so that when Madeline and Louise leave, that is when Paris sits there and says, I really like this band. And she says it basically like she's just watched Rory try to convince them to stay, and then they leave, and then she's just there with Rory. And I feel like that was her realizing that she just enjoys being companionate with Rory. Like they're just sitting there and they're in the same headspace, and I don't think that Paris has experienced that a lot.
No, and I think she respects Rory too. There's a burgeoning respect there for her too, that she doesn't run off with these girls, that she is more interested in the art on the stage than she is in running off to a drunken party with older boys. Yeah.
But so then they go to the lobby to meet back up with Suki and Lorelai, and I do just want to say, Rory's jacket in this scene is also really weird. It's like half jean jacket, half patchwork khaki jacket. I hate it. I don't know why that is her jacket.
Well, but look up, did you see what Paris had on? It was like a Nehru jacket or something. It was very...
Yeah, it was a very...
Like she wore a jacket you would wear to a job interview. I mean,
yes.
And if she had blue jeans on with it, then that's fine. But if you're going to a rock concert...
Yeah, she looks like she's 40, for sure.
She does, yeah.
But yeah.
Although her mother may have made her wear that too, so...
And while they're standing there, Rory does ask Paris why she likes Tristan, and Paris kind of doesn't really articulate it that well, but she basically says they've known each other for a really long time, and she's known him to be nicer than Rory has seen him. And then she says, I know he's flirting with me to get to you, but at least he's flirting with me. And Rory does tell her that she could do better, which I'm glad Rory does.
And we all know that.
And
everybody watching, everybody knows that Paris, she's got a future in front of her. She's beautiful, first of all. She kind of plains herself out. I mean, she makes herself look plain. She wears her hair back in a ponytail that's kind of, it just makes her look like an old maid, kind of thing. She wears stuffy clothes.
Her hair is always like very straight and down, and just like she never does anything with it, despite the fact that it's really long.
And the actress is beautiful. I mean, she's not, she's not Marilyn Monroe beautiful, but she's attractive. And they make her look bad, as bad as they can make her look. But that's her. I mean, it's obvious that she's doing this to herself, and so she doesn't feel attractive. She doesn't feel attracted to boys, I guess. And Tristan has come in and out of her life over the years. He's easy. She knows him. She doesn't have to really stretch to talk to him. And there might be other boys, but she's so focused on the academics and schoolwork and winning. She wants to win everything. And in fact, she says that several times when they're talking about their homework, because I want to win.
Well, and I think the thing that she doesn't see is that I think he has intentionally led her on several times throughout them knowing each other. I mean, that's what we saw in the earlier scene.
It is, and she knows. The comment about him flirting with her, she knows.
I mean, she gets it in that scene, but I suspect that when she says that he's been nice other times, I think that was a front. I don't think he's ever truly nice. I think he's been nice to her to keep her liking him because he knows that he can manipulate her pretty easily.
Yeah. And she might be talking about when they were 8, because they've gone to school together their entire lives. So maybe when he was a little boy, he was nice. But he has grown into an arrogant, cocky young man who thinks that his good looks are going to get him whatever he wants. And at some point, I'm assuming that Paris figures this out. So hopefully not too much longer. But I mean, I'd love to see her tell him off.
Yeah. But yeah, so then we go to the apartment building where Madeline and Louise have disappeared to, and Rory or Lorelai starts banging on every single door, and we get the only person of color apart from Lane in this episode opens the first door, and she does get the funniest line of the episode.
Yes, she does.
Lorelai asks her if she knows where the college boys are, basically, in the apartment, and she responds with, "I don't talk to anybody, people annoy me," and then slams the door in their face. Joe's just like, yeah, same.
Just the visual of Lorelai traipsing through this building with everybody in tow, you know, and knocking on every door to find these 2 girls, because she says, we came with 4 girls, we're leaving with 4 girls. Yep. I am not leaving them alone. So she does finally track them down, and she knows as soon as she enters that apartment that those boys are more than 18 years old. And she tells them, you really want this problem on your hands? You want to get arrested? Because these girls are 16. And then she has a conversation with them out in the hall. And she tells them what they need to hear. You know, this was not safe. You shouldn't have done this. There was drinking. There's no telling. You went into this apartment with boys you don't know. You didn't know how old they were. These are young men. These are not boys. You don't know what you're drinking. There could have been, she did the implication being there could have been date rape, drugs in what they were drinking. And it doesn't even matter if they were drinking. The alcohol alone would have made them susceptible.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I love how she handles it. These girls need parenting. They all need what Rory has. I mean, probably Paris as well. But I love this scene so much that she tells these girls what they need to hear. She makes them, she's not making them feel bad. She's actually making them feel cared for, because she comes across as stern, but in a loving way when she tells them, you were not safe here. You're under my protection tonight. You were not safe. I was crying at the end of the scene because I thought she is giving them the parenting that they clearly are not getting from their own parents. And that's kind of sad. And now this is a stereotype that wealthy parents don't do a good job of parenting their children. I don't know how true that is, but it is something we see in movies and TV all the time. So it's a trope, and it may be true. It certainly is true for these 2 characters, and it is for Paris a little bit too, because we have actually seen her interacting with her mother, and her mother is a real bitch. So she comes across, and she's going through a divorce, blah blah blah. But you don't talk to your child like that. It's a wonderful scene.
The implication we get throughout this episode is, at the very least, these girls, their parents are really self-involved. Yeah. I don't remember what Madeline's thing is, but when they're discussing whose house to go to, Louise says they can't go to hers because her mother is having an affair, which just suggests that her mother is more concerned with her own affair than she is with whatever is happening with her 16-year-old daughter.
It's very sad. Yeah. And Paris says her mother is redoing the house because of their divorce. And that's kind of sad too, because she's not taking care of Paris emotionally. I mean, her mother is not the only one going through this divorce. Paris is going through it too. Paris could probably stand to see a counselor. She's suffering. And it's not, we don't spend a lot of time on Paris. It's not her story. We just see hints of it. But you can tell that she's going through this divorce too. And her mother is totally oblivious to that. Well, before we go on, we missed a scene when we were talking about the nosebleed seats. Let's just back up a second. I know, looking at my notes, remembering that when she and Suki are sitting next to the 2 guys in the nosebleed seats, she starts pummeling Suki with questions about Rachel. And was she cute?
She asks
what did
if
she
she's
look
pretty.
like?
Yeah.
Was she pretty? Yeah, and she says she's Elle Macpherson pretty.
Yeah, which actually, funny that you mentioned Friends in this episode. I had to look up Elle Macpherson because I knew the name, but I wasn't 100% sure who she was. And then I looked her up, and she's Joey's hot Australian roommate in Friends.
Yeah. Elle
She's in a
McPherson
couple
was
episodes of
like,
Friends.
she was the beautiful model of the 90s. So this is definitely and the other two people that she mentions are pretty. But Elle McPherson,
Catherine
when
Zeta-Jones.
Catherine, she's I wouldn't call her pretty. I'd call her beautiful. What's the other one?
Yeah, I would actually say that out of the ones that she mentioned, I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was the most beautiful, but that's all subjective.
But Elle McPherson was model beautiful and closer probably to Lorelai's age, and because I think Catherine Zeta-Jones is a little bit older. But anyway, but that gets it across. That Rachel was beautiful. Model beautiful. Anyway, so I wrote in my notes that Lorelai is having a FOMO moment about Luke and Rachel. Kind of jealous, but she doesn't understand yet why. So it came across to me at first as she, the fun she was missing out on. But Suki kind of does a bullseye on her and says, no, you're jealous. Anyway, so that was a backup. We forgot to talk about that, but
it does seem like this appearance of the concept of Rachel is like the first time that Lorelai has really had to think about Luke having a love life.
Yeah. And it is a fear of missing out because she not only is kind of jealous of somebody she's never met, but she's kind of upset that she didn't know about this too. I mean, she's not in this scene, but earlier she's like, how did I not know about this? Well, you had an 11-year-old and you were just buying this house.
And probably because the writers didn't come up with Rachel before this episode.
Yep, that's exactly the reason.
But yeah, so at the end of the scene where Lorelai is kind of, I want to say reaming the girls out, but telling them why what they did was wrong. At the end of that scene, Paris turns to Rory and says, you know what? I think this is the best night I've ever had.
Yeah. And why is that, do you think? Why does she say that?
I mean, it sounds like this is maybe the first time she's actually gone somewhere and had fun. She avoids social interactions, and the few times that we've seen her go to like dances and parties, she's been miserable the whole time.
Miserable, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just like, she was finally hanging out with someone who's on her own wavelength, Rory.
And Lorelai, because she agrees with everything Lorelai's saying. And she's seeing a parent in action here. A woman who takes parenting seriously. So, and that's fun. But also I think the adventure through the apartment building where they're knocking on doors, and it's kind of, that's kind of fun. I mean, the whole evening has been interesting and not what Paris had expected it to be. I think she expected to be bored. She liked the concert. She loved walking through this apartment building in New York City looking for these girls. Mm-hmm. She loved seeing these two girls. And I don't think it's that she loved them being yelled at by Lorelai, but the way Lorelai talks about it, what she's saying, why she, the story that she's telling them is one they need to hear. You made yourselves vulnerable. Don't do that to yourself. Value yourself more.
I suspect this is also probably the first time that Paris has experienced like not being in the minority, because normally she's with just these two girls. So, because there's two of them and only one of her, they usually get to have the minority vote. But here, like, Rory and Paris both think that what they did was wrong, and so does Lorelai. So it's not necessarily that she's, like, enjoying watching them get yelled at, but, like, she's enjoying being on the correct side and seeing other people who are a little bit more socially adept say the things that she would probably like to say, say the things that she knows to be true.
Yeah.
And then we get the actual rummage sale is the very last scene, and Lane is wearing one of the concert t-shirts. It says Bangles Tour 2000. It's actually a very boring shirt, but it's definitely from the concert, so they brought back a t-shirt for Lane.
That's something we failed to mention, too, because Lorelai bought t-shirts for all four girls.
Bought t-shirts for everybody.
And then she gets there, and the two girls are gone. Well, they don't get their t-shirts, so she gives one to Lane, and I'm assuming she kept the fourth one for herself, so yeah.
Oh, and then Rory reveals to Lorelai that Paris has agreed to let her split debate time. We kind of glossed over this earlier, but originally Paris handed out all of the assignments, and she told Rory that she could do the conclusion. She herself was going to do the debate, Madeline was going to do the intro, and Louise was going to take questions, which obviously that is giving Paris herself the most important part, the actual debate. So the fact that she is now letting Rory split debate time with her means that she's truly giving Rory kind of a meatier chunk of the assignment, and she's decided is over the moon.
Yeah, she's decided to trust her. And that it's a great scene, and I I kind of saw that coming though, because we're seeing Paris mature a little bit. She's evolving as a character and as a human being. She's opening herself up to Rory, and that's a good thing for both of them.
Yeah, and we've seen them take small steps towards friendship leading up to now, and this was kind of
real friendship, not the kind she has with Louise and Madeline.
And then we get another Luke and Lorelai scene. Luke is apparently really into sushi-shaped fridge magnets.
I think he just wants to buy something that he wants to. There's nothing he needs, nothing he sees that he wants. But he wants to buy something because that's what you're supposed to do, is for a good cause.
Yep.
Oh, and the cause, by the way, let's talk about the cause. They're going to rebuild a bridge somewhere, so...
Rebuild a bridge in town, Yeah, and he apologizes to Lorelai for freaking out, and then she apologizes for wearing the shirt because she didn't know what it meant, and she gives him back the shirt, which at first he kind of refuses, but she says, no, it's okay to hold on to memories, so I think you should have this. And he wants it to be very clear that he's not pining for Rachel, he's just remembering her.
Yeah, and she's showing him compassion that I think he appreciates. He needs. Because he might not have realized that he needed, and that was why he overreacted to seeing her wearing that shirt. He wasn't ready to part with that shirt yet. It's okay to hold on to stuff. It's a very sweet scene, and there's nothing romantic in the scene. She reinforces for him that it's okay to have memories about somebody that you loved and that has left your life. And hold on to this shirt. It's perfectly fine to do that.
And that kind of brings us to the end of the episode.
It's the end of the episode. We don't know how much money they made, if they made enough to rebuild the bridge. But it's probably one of the best episodes I think we've seen this season. It's one of my favorites. The short scene where she's telling the girls who have run off that they need to take care of themselves a little bit better and to make better decisions is one of my favorite scenes in this show so far. And it's what the show is all about. It's about parenting and relationships and showing people love in different ways. So, she and Luke are not, romantic interest yet, but there's still love between them. It's, human love. And she shows him that at the end. When she compassionately gives him the shirt back, she's showing these two teenage girls who she doesn't know. She's showing them love by telling them that they need to take better care of themselves. And the way her style of parenting, it is not always obvious, but she is the best kind of parent. And I think she does have a good close relationship with her daughter, which a lot of teenage girls don't have. You and I had it, but not a lot of your girlfriends did. I think, and I'm not sure we could probably even count the ones that did have good close relationships with their moms, but these two have that, and it's lovely. But she also she makes rules for her, and her daughter follows them because she knows that the rules are there to keep her safe and to make sure that she has a good life. They're not arbitrary rules like Mrs. Kim's. Now Mrs. Kim probably doesn't see her rules as arbitrary. They're based in her religion and her cultural upbringing and background, and so that's a little bit different. I see them as arbitrary, but I don't share her cultural background. So I think they're a little awful, and they result in her daughter lying to her. And as far as we know, Rory, for the most part, does not lie to her mom. She's kept a few things from her, but it usually comes out, but she doesn't lie to her. And that's a good thing. The way you have a good relationship is when you don't lie to each other, when you're honest with each other, and when you have rules. And so these two girls who go to this party, do their parents not make rules for them? Is this accepted behavior? I don't think we have that answered for us, but it certainly isn't acceptable with Lorelai.
Yeah, I think this is a good parenting episode for Lorelai.
Yes, it was.
She makes mistakes as a parent, but this is one of the episodes where we really get to see her parenting in action, and it's good parenting.
It's also a friendship episode because not only do Rory and Paris connect a little bit more than they have, start to bond, but man, Suki never says a word about her giving those tickets away.
So
they clearly have a great friendship too, and that giggling scene just got to me.
But yeah, it's a good episode for Paris. We're finally getting to see a softer side of her.
So that, dear listeners, is all for today.
I'm Tess Adair, and you can find me at my website, tessadair.com, where you can sign up for my email list, or you can follow me on Instagram at author.tess.adair, or on TikTok at author.tess.adair. And if you want to support us on Patreon, we're at patreon.com/whereyoulead.
And I'm Beth Von Baron. You can follow me on Instagram at STL_writer_Beth, or sign up for my weekly Substack email, Saturday Morning Musings, at stlwriterbeth.substack.com. This has been Where You Lead, our fun and terribly witty podcast about the Gilmore Girls from the perspective of a mother and daughter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks. See you then.